I actually do live in a town that only has 7 buildings, other than houses. It's got no stores, it's dirt roads, no traffic lights. It's got a church. It's got a post office, which is also Mary Dillman's home. Got to go into her home to use the post office. And yeah, of course, I taught her kids, I taught her grandkids, you know. So, used to be the gas station, then they took out the pumps. And then it's got a school and the bar. Like, that's it. I said no stores, but there is a bar. And a town hall. So at the school is slightly different. Every older kid is partnered with a younger kid. Every older kid watches out for a younger kid. They're a math tutor for them, they're a writing tutor for them, they ride the bus with them, they help them put on their snowsuits. The little kids are protected by the big kids because the big kids take care of them. That's a structure that's in this school. It's also a school where kids work, and I know this is where you'll think, don't even talk about it in my community. But the kids cook, they clean, they shovel snow, they work physically at the school. Now, not only do kids like shoveling snow and cooking and cleaning in the middle of their day to get out their energy, especially if they're 6th graders, but you'd think I'd have a town where people would say, I don't send my kids to school to scrape dishes. And parents in town, fortunately for us, said, I have such a hard time getting her to do dishes at home. Thank you. This is great. She's just building a work ethic in these kids. And you know that the school is cleaner everywhere if kids are helping to clean it. Now, I know it sounds radical in this country, except that in Japan, half the cleaning is done by kids. I mean, it's just normal. It just hasn't been normal in our setting. Kids also do physical work. I opened my book with the story of kids in my classroom, which are 5th and 6th graders, building a playhouse for younger kids, kindergartners, which they co-designed with the kindergartners. And it's a 2-story miniature playhouse, very well crafted, which they built mostly after school and on weekends. And I did show up. I'm a carpenter. I did show up after school and on weekends to work with the students. I know not every teacher wants to do that. To me, I loved it. This playhouse is still there, even though these kids are well grown. One of the advantages to living in the middle of nowhere is that nobody's hired to do anything in town, so we have work for students to do. So when the state asked the town to create an amphibian census for the town, a list of what amphibians are in town, the other towns hired herpetologists, naturalists, biologists to come into town and do a 1-day sampling census. We had no money as a town to hire a herpetologist, so we used 3rd and 4th graders. And it wasn't a fair fight. The other towns had one guy come in for 1 day. We had 37 kids every day after school going into every piece of woods, every swamp, every field to find every possible amphibian they could. They learned to identify every larval amphibian and every adult amphibian. Can you guess which town in the state had the most data and the most photographs and the most samples and the most weights and measures of amphibians? When the kids sent their data to the state amphibian census, they got a response from the state. Congratulations, young herpetologists of Shutesbury, Massachusetts. You submitted more data than any town in the state of Massachusetts. We did find a few errors in your data, but in general, we thought this was very robust data. And the kids were like, a few errors? And they said there were 2 species you identified which are not actually native to your area. So first, we had to calm the kids down because they were so mad. And they wrote a respectful response. Dear Department of Conservation, State of Massachusetts, thank you for your kind letter. We were so happy to contribute, blah, 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 blah. We respectfully disagree with your critique of our data. We believe we have found these 2. Here are our photographs. Here are the weights and the weights of these creatures, the measurements of them. Here are all our data. Here are the site maps where we collected them. The state responded, we want to send a herpetologist out right away. And of course, the state herpetologist came out. The kids brought them to the swamps and bogs where they had collected these. And of course, the kids were right. They had found these species that were not supposed to live in our town. And the kids said, we're not just practicing to be scientists. We kind of already are scientists. And these are 3rd and 4th graders doing adult-level science and also contributing to the world. They became experts in scientific identification and they were helping the world at the same time. Again, I can't separate the character from scholarship here. They also were part of a service project to protect my favorite local amphibian, which is the spotted salamander. These are about 6-inch long salamanders that live in the woods in our town. And these guys were crossing the roads on summer nights in the rain to mate in vernal ponds. And they were getting run over by pickup trucks and cars. And so a lot of us, tapping into our character side, would set up roadblocks at night with flashlights, and we'd stop the trucks and we would carry the salamanders across the road, which was really great spirit building, except that it was really hard to teach the next day when you were up all night and the kids were up all night carrying salamanders, you know. So we were part of a project to build the world's first salamander tunnels. And so, raising money, we got tunnels built under the road where the salamanders get shepherded in and they climb under the road, and these are the salamanders emerging from the tunnel. So we built drift fences in the woods, which are like cattle fences, but they're only 3 inches tall. And those are like big V's, and the salamanders bump into them, and they get funneled and funneled and funneled down until they come out safely through these tunnels. And this is just a mile from my house, this salamander crossing. There is a local bluegrass band which took its name, Salamander Crossing, from this event. So again, and that sign was designed by a 3rd grader, just to let you know, even though it was produced by the state. And then kids created a field guide to local amphibians. And this started a rash of field guides that we started doing around the country for local amphibians or local birds or local anything, because you realize there may be a field guide to birds of the Midwest, but there's no field guide to birds of Rockland, right? I mean, you can make a local field guide that people in your town would want to own that kids can create, a micro field guide. I'll get back to that. We also, and I explain this in the book, took on other scientific projects or historical projects. We tested the towns for radon to see if people's homes were safe. We collaborated with a local university for their testing kits, and we actually found radon problems in town. This report was not only went out to everyone in town, but then became requested by radon boards all over the state. It was requested by the Federal Radon Commission. And again, these were 5th and 6th graders doing all the data analysis and writing on their computers. We then tested surface water. These are multiple years. I was there 28 years, just to not lump this all together. We did a surface water testing for town where kids use high school level pollution kits to see if there was pollution in our streams, and produced a report that's still on the wall, and the kids presented this at town meeting. And then we did the most ambitious study, which was well water in town. Everyone in my town has a private well. There's no water system. There's no sewage system. I have a well. The school has a well. Nobody knows if their water is safe. It sounds crazy, but it's not the law that you have to test your own water unless you're going to sell your home. So we connected with a local college to use an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer, a machine that costs more than any home in the town where I live. It's a $400,000 machine. And these kids went down to the college to test water samples from private homes to see if we had safe water. And these kids sent out a survey to people in town about where their septic system was, where their well was, so we could see if road salt runoff or leaching from septic system was causing problems, and created a report for the town and a report for each individual family. These kids spent 3 weeks going back and forth with student teachers and parents driving to a college laboratory to do data analysis in a college lab. If you want to take students whose parents didn't finish high school and get them interested in going to college, there's no more powerful way than to get them on site at a college campus. After spending 3 weeks working in a college lab, these kids not only were convinced that they were going to be college material, they said to me, "Mr. Berger, do you know college is easier than elementary school?" And I said, "Tommy, tell me more here." And he said, "Well, those guys are nice to us, so don't tell them I told you this, but they sleep till noon, you know. They plan their week so they have no classes on Friday, you know, and then they start partying on Thursday night. It's like, we work hard in this school. I mean, those guys, they don't even go to class every day. And I said, do you think you're college material? Absolutely. Every student. But they also loved working together with college students in a college lab doing real data analysis. And each family in town that was part of the project, including me, got a report, an individual report of the quality of his or her water. My water was not perfect, actually. And I have a water filtration system in my home now, thanks to my student researchers. And they created a website for the town where all their data could be shared publicly, so people could just get online, find the general findings for the town, although individual data was private and confidential. All the aggregate data was presented to the whole town. Now, let me just tell you, I am old-fashioned. I don't know how to build a website. I had no idea. The kids said, this is crazy making a written report. We should have a website to share these data. And I said, yeah, that would be good, except I don't know anything about building a website. And they said, well, let's get our college students to do it with us. So of course, they asked the college students, who then came up the hill and spent days building the website with my students. And I still don't know how to build a website, but my students did. So it was a good sense that you don't have to be an expert yourself to do great work with students. Now, remember that field guide that my students created? Well, I brought that field guide to Portland, Maine, which is at King Middle School, a school with 30 languages spoken, a school that's primarily low-income kids, many of whom are refugees from Sudan or Somalia or Eastern Europe right now, because it's a refugee placement school. And we said, what about doing a field guide here? You have, in Portland, Maine, a bay that tourists come from all over the country to visit. Is there a field guide for it? They said, no. I said, there you are. You can produce the first field guide to the bay in Portland. And they did. And that field guide was created by kids from Sudan and Somalia as much as by local Portland kids, all working together. And each kid has his or her own discrete page where they have a creature that lives in the bay, and they did a scientific drawing and scientific writing about that creature, and then wrote it up. And this field guide is sold at parks stores to raise money to save the bay and protect the bay, and it's sold at tourist shops. Now imagine being a 7th grader, whether you grew up in Portland or whether you came from Sudan, and you bring your parents or your foster parents into a store and you say, that's my book. Do you want to see my page? Like, I didn't do anything in middle school ever that I would have wanted to show somebody. But imagine having your stuff being sold by the National Park Service because it's your book. An incredible transformational experience. The other thing great about it is that they didn't allow kids to go on the internet and find a picture of a jellyfish and copy it. They brought them down to the bay and they put on wetsuits and got underwater cameras and they took photographs of this stuff underwater. Now, why go to all that trouble? Let me tell you what it did. First of all, it made kids think science was the coolest thing on earth, because they were screaming, they were crying, they were freezing their butts off, but they had stories to tell for the next 5 years. I mean, imagine if you went to school and ended up putting on a wetsuit and going down to the bay and taking underwater photographs of jellyfish. I mean, what a story. Plus, it was white, working class Portland kids, along with black African kids just here from Sudan or Somalia, together, being laughing, screaming, crying, being overwhelmed, being heroes together. The fact that they sit together in the cafeteria in that school, which is a rare thing, is because of this kind of stuff, because they do stuff together, not because someone's asking them to sit together. So this process of pushing kids beyond their comfort levels to do great things has built bonds in that school. You saw those kids up presenting. They actually hang out socially across those backgrounds in that school in a really remarkable way. Then I brought it to the lowest performing middle school in the state of Massachusetts, and they created a field guide to what was called the dump, but was actually a bog, behind the school. First they had to clean out the couches and shopping carts and fast food wrappers, and then build ramps and interpretive signs and make it a preserve, and then create a field guide for it. This school went from the lowest scoring ELA school in the state within 3 years to being equal to the district average. Again, not because the writing they did in this particular field guide made them score better on tests, but because their personal self-image was, we're not the dumb kids in the worst school in the state anymore. We're the kids who just got on television for reclaiming the bog behind our school and creating a field guide that the mayor is holding up at a press conference. It's like, Their self-image was different. They wanted to study now.